3 minutes to tell us about your project. You've got 3 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. May I first of all commend the African Union Leadership Academy for taking this initiative to popularize Agenda 2063. The African Union is the major instrument that our heads of state and government had the idea to put in place in order to promote our democracy, our integration, and also asserting ourselves in the international arena, our dignity, our personality among international bigwigs. The African Union has come of age. The time has come for us to draw a balance sheet and to see what we can do in the new international and even national context. The head of the African Union, the head of the African Union Commission, has to prove his worth as a leader, and he has to be worthwhile. And if I'm elected as chair of the commission, my priorities will be the priorities of Africa: peace and security, economic governance, integration, focus on youth, institutional reform, climate change, migration, the place of Africa in the world. And we have major instruments that already do exist. And the first is Agenda 2063. And where the chair of the commission has to step in is to ensure a proper and methodical implementation of Africa's decisions. We know that we need to have priorities. For example, since 2002, over 1,800 decisions have been taken, but of course, implementation is still lagging behind. That's a big question. What is happening? We all need to step in. And so the chairperson of the commission has to do what he's supposed to do in order to ensure the implementation of the decisions taken by heads of state. And there must be transparency in the work done within the commission, and also even take risk. Why not? That's his role. Risk taking. Risk is part of the leadership. Of course, the commission chair has to show commitment, goodwill, competence, but also he should convince people, and he should have good faith in order to ensure Africa first as a reality. Well, I have my experience, and I do hope that my experience and my qualifications will actually lead me to this position. I thank you.
Honorable, thank you very much. The next candidate that I'm calling to the podium, Honorable Mba Makwe of Equatorial Guinea. Thank you very much, Honorable. Let's start from you introducing us yourself and your vision for Africa.
Microphone needs to be switched on, please. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Africa. We are gathered here to listen to the candidates for the position of chairperson of the chairperson of the African Union Commission. And while we are gathered here, our continent, Africa, is sick with the unemployment rate beyond 50% among qualified Africans. Our continent is sick. When we look at the discrimination in salaries against women, our continent is sick. When the Commission of the African Union is financed for more than 80% by external finances, extra budgetary finances, and not contributions from member states, we consider that our continent is sick. When young Africans are dying on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea while looking for a better life, our continent is sick. As As concerns myself, I consider myself to be the man of the moment. My name is Agapito Ba Mokui. I am currently the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea. After 18 years of experience within UNESCO, I consider that I have unique expertise and also with my language knowledge. I speak English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. And nevertheless, I do not consider myself a French-speaking, Portuguese-speaking, Spanish-speaking. I consider myself simply Africophone. I introduce myself to you today in order to say that I do have a dream. It is the dream of the youth of Africa. It is the dream of the founding fathers of our organization. I dream of an Africa in which young people shall be involved before, during, and after decisions are taken in our organization. I dream of an Africa of inclusion where women will no longer be discriminated against. I dream of an Africa which is competitive, which is imposing and is respected in the concert of nations. And finally, I dream of seeing an African Union Commission which has an average age of 40 years, a younger commission. Thank you for your attention. Gracias, obrigado, shukrani. Thank you.
Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for this presentation. I would like to ask you now to welcome Honorable Dr. Amina Mohamed, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kenya. She is our fourth candidate. Would you please applaud as she comes in?
Bienvenue, Madame la Ministre.
Welcome, Honorable Minister. You have 3 minutes to introduce yourself and to also present your vision. Your microphone, please.
Thank you very much. Ahlan, bonsoir, boa tarde, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Habari zenu. I'm delighted to be here this evening to discuss issues that I know are important to all of us. And I'd like to start by acknowledging my fellow candidates. I'm truly pleased and humbled to participate in this conversation today with them. And I hope that we can all dialogue to bring the African Union closer to the people that it serves. So, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to tell you a little bit about myself. I have served in Kenya's public and diplomatic service. I have risen through the ranks to become Kenya's permanent representative to the United Nations in Geneva. I served as an Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations and a Deputy Director to the United Nations Environment Programme. In the course of my service, I have worked with many colleagues from around the continent, and we've worked together on issues of importance to our continent, including mega projects on infrastructure, international and regional trade, notably on negotiating agreements on trade. And one example actually truly stands out, and that's when we together, led by myself, negotiated the amendment to the TRIPS agreement, the trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, which allowed us as Africans to access affordable medicines for HIV, for tuberculosis, and for malaria. I've also worked on climate change, on biodiversity, on desertification, on governance, on the rule of law, on democracy, on human rights, on youth, peace, security, and cohesion. So my being here should actually not come as a surprise. Throughout my career, I've been intimately involved with all issues African, both soft and hard. I have chaired many African meetings. I have spoken for the African Union. I have coordinated African groups. And I know the state of our union. I actually have a clear idea on why I'm fit for this job. At this defining moment in Africa's history, we're all aware, and me in particular, of the massive opportunities that the African Union presents, and I understand the challenges that need to be collectively resolved. I am known as a unifier, a consensus builder, a team player.
Honorable Amina, thank you very much. The next candidate and the final one, Professor Abdoulaye Bathily of Senegal. Excellency, thank you very much. Would you please introduce us yourself and your vision for Africa? Thank you.
Before you take the floor, I'd like to clarify that you have got a headset. If you don't understand the language in which the other candidate will be using, the headset is right next to you. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
Je voudrais vous remercier.
I'd like to thank you. I'm not a candidate of circumstances. I'm a candidate by conviction. All my life, I've committed myself to the African unity cause and for the people of Africa and those that are in diaspora. I have, over the past several years, I have taken part in preparing most of the fundamental documents on which the OAU and then the AU have been working on. And there are certain 6 issues that appear to be important to me for the future and to which I would like to make my contribution. First of all, the deep reform of this organization, which is 53 years old, the issue of peace and security, the matter of regional integration, and the matter of women and the youth, matter of the relationships between the African Union, diaspora, and the civil society organizations. And lastly, the reform of our relationships with our external partners. My personal experience as former leader of the student movement, as a trade unionist, as a university professor, as a researcher and a lecturer. For years, I contributed to an accumulation of knowledge that I shared with the students all over the world. And today, basing myself on my experience in the government and my international experience at the United Nations, but also at the African Union here, where I was a special representative, I want to make available all that experience and put it at the service of our organizations. And this is a duty to me, and there are many other people like me who would like to give something to Africa. They want to give something to Africa, a reason to hope for women, a reason to hope for the youth, also a reason to hope, and that's what we need. Africa needs to face the challenges of the modern world and should become a major player on the international scene. And this is what we're talking about today, ladies and gentlemen. The youth need this. They need hope. They need hope for economic and social development. They need a cultural renaissance, and this is what we need. I have the knowledge, I'm capable, I have the necessary authority to talk with using all this knowledge to face the entire world so that Africa is rehabilitated. And this is my program. I'm ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome 5 of your candidates for this important debate. People of Africa watching this important and historic broadcast live at home, this is the first of its kind Mjadala Africa Leadership Debate, live from here, the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, to your home. Please stay with us. Excellency candidates, this debate will give you, the candidates, an opportunity to speak to the African citizens, popularize the African Union, and showcase your visions for the integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa. Once again, congratulations and welcome.
Pendant l'instant, on vous
we have been listening to the speakers, and there are themes that come repeatedly. So for the next 2 hours, you have decided to raise a number of themes that relate to Africa. So first of all, we're going to talk about the youth and the women, because the youth constitute over 60% of our population, and the women represent more than half of our population. So thereafter, we'll talk about international mobility and continental mobility. We'll talk about regional integration, and moving from one point to another on our continent has remained a challenge. Then, thirdly, we'll talk about peace and security. In a world that's faced with challenges, we'll talk about security. But one of the essential issues to discuss here, and you chose this yourselves, the financing of the African Union Commission, because for now, and some candidates have talked about it, Honorable Agapito referred to it, a commission which remains financed by others. Is there means for us to finance this commission ourselves? So this is what we're going to discuss for the next 2 hours, and everyone will have 1 minute to answer a question that will be put to him or to her. So those are the rules that we're going to follow.
Candidates, this is a reminder. We ask you at all times to put the earphones with you so that you won't be lost in translation. Rule number 2, as Alan, my colleague, was explaining, with all the questions that we're going to ask, each of you will have 3 minutes to answer the question. Final rule, please do not interrupt the other candidate within those 3 minutes. Thank you very much. Good luck and welcome back to your home, Addis Ababa. Alan, can you take the first question?
j'ai dit tout à l'heure que nous devons
Said a short while ago that we were going to start with the most important, the youth and women. And on this continent, we have 60% of the youth that are going through a very difficult period with unemployment, with terrorism, with a certain number of problems. Women do not play their proper role. They are mistreated. We do not take care of them. They do not occupy the place that they should be occupying. So we would want to ask you the question directly, candidates. And I'm addressing myself now to Honorable Pelonomi Venson Moitoi. How do you expect to change the situation of the youth and women in the coming years?
This situation, Mr. Moderator, we will all be aware that the AU Commission has already put into place some legislation that member states have taken up. What remains to be done is to see that implementation is to be put into place for both women and children. But what needs to be followed up with speed are laws relating to early child marriages, particularly female genital mutilation, domestic violence, and child labor, because these continue to plague the continent throughout. But also to make sure that public awareness and public education are promoted in our member states. To deal with youth unemployment, the biggest issue, again, the AU has taken action here to sensitize member states to remodeling our education curriculum, to make sure that we don't just educate our children for academics. We educate our children so that they come out of education with some skill, so that they can be people that are useful not only to the economy but to themselves. And we have to make sure that women are protected, because when women are protected and are useful to the economy, they will raise healthier and more peaceful homes. In the long term, this brings peace into homes and therefore peace into communities and ultimately peace into the nation. But also, for women, we tend to leave them out when we deal with peace, because during the times of war, women and children are the most that get affected. They get hit worse, and we know that quite often they are not the instigators of wars. But if we give them education and we bring them into places of work, and ultimately they contribute to peace, we can be convinced that wars might be decreased, peace might happen, and therefore there is value in educating women. There is value in educating children because there will be peace on the continent. I thank you.
Le candidat du Tchad.
The candidate from Chad will answer the same question. Ask the same question, how would you answer? Yes, the African population is more than 1 billion, and among that population, 60% of the youth and also a majority of women. The youth and women cannot just continue listening to rhetorical discourses. Women, this silent majority, this majority that wakes up very early and sleeps very late. Allow me to tell you a story. At the end of last year, we arrested a girl who had a belt who belonged to Boko Haram in Chad. When we asked her the question, why did she want to die? She said simply that she was told that there she would have the possibility of choosing her partner. To say that the survival of a certain, the continuation rather of a certain number of backward practices still affects the feminine population. How then can we resolve the problem of the youth and women? We have to empower them through education, through training, through giving them loans, through jobs. Several strategies are ongoing, are being used on our continent at the national level, at the continental level, and even at the international level. But up to now, the problem remains. We must absolutely be innovative. The young people, if left to themselves. Now, I come from Chad. It is a Sahelian country. These young people are dying in their thousands, going across the desert. 4,400 dead this year through the Mediterranean Sea. Are we going to watch this happen? No, we shouldn't continue to do so. I believe that this really should be of concern to all the leaders, all the decision makers of Africa. It is an issue that concerns us. We need employment. We need education. We need training. We absolutely need, be innovative. Our economic model, the one that looks outside of Africa, has demonstrated its limits. As long as there is no economic development and there is great demographic growth, it is a catastrophe. Women, unfortunately, on our continent remain limited to two functions. Production, 80% of agricultural production is made by women. They own only 1% of the land. And then reproduction, and in both cases, they do not get any dividends for it. This is scandalous. And I think that if I were to be elected chairperson of the African Union Commission, one of my priorities would be to resolve the issue of the youth and of women. I do not have a magic wand, even if my name is Musa. Musa is Moses. I do not have a magic wand, but I think that with everybody's support. No, the time has run out. The candidate from Equatorial Guinea. I am the youngest candidate in the history of the Organization of African Union. And yet in my campaign, the most important issue is the youth. And there is a reason to that. A short while ago, we said that the majority of the African population is the youth, but it is worse. We have cases of terrorism. We have unemployment for the youth. This situation cannot continue. It's been years, it's been centuries that we've been talking about the youth, but the result is always the same. Our young people who are dying on the Mediterranean shores, looking for a better life. Women who are forgotten. All our programs, we talk about women all the time. There are no solutions. I I'm standing for the position of chairperson of the African Union Commission, and I have concrete solutions for the youth. I suggest, if I were to be elected, I think I will be elected in January, I suggest a position of a director who would work within the office of the chairperson of the African Union Commission. I think we should even think about a commissioner in charge of the youth and women. We need concrete measures now for that, and in order to take into account, we talk about the youth, but we don't consult them. We have to consult the youth before, during, and after decisions are taken. And the only way of doing this is to include a key position, an important position within the African Union Commission to deal with the issue of the youth. There is another proposal between now and 4 years' time. At the end of my term of office, I would like to see the average age of the African Union at less than 40, maximum of 40 years. I think we're in the era of technology, of computerization, and our young people should be at the heart of our decisions. When I talk about the youth, I'm talking about young men, I'm talking about young women, exactly the same thing. Now, in the statistics, we saw a short while ago that women represent about 80% of agricultural production in Africa, but most of these women are not educated. And so we must give priority to the education of women, the education of the youth. And briefly, I would like to say I do have concrete proposals. The African Union Commission must have young people in important position, and if possible, for the women as well. Thank you. The candidate from Kenya.
In fact, this is an issue that is very close to my heart. And I believe this, that if you really want women and the youth at the landing, they have to be at the takeoff as well. We must include them in all our decision-making processes. And my colleagues have referred to the need to educate them, to provide them with skills. But after the skills, we need to give them internships. We have a program that we have already developed in my country, and I think it is present in other countries. We just need to stretch it out and expand it into other places. And it's a program which allows the private sector and the public sector to take in interns. Now, for the private sector, as an incentive, we give them tax breaks. We also facilitate their businesses to make sure that a certain percentage of their workforce is the interns that they've taken on board. And we make sure that they include them in decision-making as well. We've also created iHubs for those kids who we know are innovative and need a place where they can incubate their ideas, they can grow them, and as soon as they're ready, we actually help them commercialize these ideas. And not only that, we have created links for them with youth in other countries. And so every time I travel, one of the things that I do is go and visit the youth. I was recently in Senegal and in Cote d'Ivoire, and I visited the youth in universities, both at the Cheikh Anta Diop University and at a business school in Cote d'Ivoire. And everything they said, right, added up to a dignified livelihood. We go to school, we finish school. At the end of our school period, there are no jobs for us. And I told them that we are actually indebted to them because we are the generation that followed the liberation. We came out of school and had 4 or 5 opportunities thrown at us, right? We did not do the same for them. And so we're actually indebted to make sure that we create the opportunities that they need, that we create the level playing field that they need. And as for women, there is no way you can actually, as President Obama has said consistently, you cannot play a football game with 50% of your players out of the field. Yeah. And so therefore we must include them in everything. They actually are disproportionately affected in conflict. And so we must make sure that they're sitting at the conflict resolution tables so that their voices are heard, their concerns are taken into account, and they're actually a part of the leadership of the country that is born out of conflict. But apart from that, I think that the Secretariat needs to be much younger. And I agree that we need to have younger faces and younger people in the Secretariat so that the decisions we make will have issues of the youth at the center, at the front, and at the back. Thank you.
Le candidat du...
The candidate from Senegal. the issue of women and the youth is a problem of civilization. When one talks about the youth, when one talks about women, one is not talking about a small minority that should be supported as if we were good Samaritans. We need women and the youth to be in the heart of the social processes, the economic processes in our countries, and that these women and these youth should be at the beginning and at the end of decisions, and that they should be at the heart of the concerns addressed by decision makers. But we have to be careful as far as this issue is concerned. For me, women and the youth, for example, in the area of education, we are talking about taking into account all of the proposals and the solutions that have been experimented on here and there on the continent. We need to look at projects. We talked about some of them a short while ago, but the most important problem in reality is that we cannot resolve this issue decisively if we do not take into account, for example, the issue of the economy. The African economy is based or founded on external, is outside looking. It is a rental economy, if you like. Can we resolve the issue today of the employment of the youth without the industrialization of the continent? This is the most important issue. We shall have the opportunity of coming back to it. The issue of education. We're not talking about education for the sake of education. We are talking about education that really is aimed at getting employment. The issue of women also is not just an issue of ad hoc projects, but we're talking about ending all of the discriminations that women are subjected to, the violences against women in times of peace as well as in times of war. This is what we need to fight against, and today, therefore, we need to put women at the very heart of social processes, at the heart of economic processes, not only on an ad hoc basis, but also in a structural way, so that with the structural modification of our economies, changes with the transformation of our economies, both agriculture, the modernization of agriculture, industrialization of the continent, we can resolve this issue of employment in time, in good time, and not on an ad hoc basis. And I believe that the role of the Commission today is to deal.
Thank you very much. Those of you watching this debate live from the African Union headquarters here in Addis Ababa, we thank you very much for joining us. We'll now take a short break here, but remember, you can follow us on Twitter at Africa_Union, hashtag Mjadala Africa with K. We'll be right back. Guests, please stay put. Stay seated, please. Candidates can leave, but guests stay here, please. Excellencies, respected guests, kindly we ask you to remain seated. Our live broadcast is going to continue in a moment. Dear viewers, welcome back to the very first Mjadala Africa leadership debate here at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. So far, 5 of the candidates told us what they feel about the youth and women participation in the continent's programs and making our vision a reality. Without any further ado, I'm going to go to the second question. Excellencies, we've been talking about time and again how important free movement of people in Africa has been and is and should be. According to your visions or your plans, why is the issue of free movement of people so important in this continent to make our visions a reality? We start from the candidate from Chad. You have 3 minutes, sir.
The most important mission of the African Union is to ensure that there is integration. The movement of persons ensures at the very least 3 objectives. First of all, the movement of persons ensures or is an engine, if you like, for integration. The movement of persons goes side by side with the movement of goods and the movement of capital. And so this becomes an engine for economic growth. The movement of persons is also a factor of mixing both human and cultural units. And so it is a cause of unity. Now, this segregation that was done by the colonizers, Bismarck was saying that a country makes its history but suffers its geography. Now, we interfered with our history. Now, read my lips. We messed up our history and our geography was imposed on us. And so we suffer both our history and our geography. Now, from one country to another country becomes really a war zone. It is totally unacceptable. Now, the African passport that has just been launched is a good initiative, but the infrastructures, intra-African trade, which is insignificant between ECOWAS and ECAS, for example, it represents less than 5%. Our economies really we sell our raw materials, and our economy is really towards the outside, and the mobility of the workers is a necessity. And by the way, mobility is essentially between African countries, intra-African mobility. So I think that the argument that is often put forward is the argument of security, and this is a legitimate concern. We have to ensure that security is ensured, but we cannot keep arguing that almost 60 years after we became independent, we cannot say that one cannot cross a border even when one has family across that border. That, again, is unacceptable. Trade, education, training, the change, evolution of the entire continent depends on the mobility of goods and persons. Another problem linked to that one is the issue of migration. Unfortunately, the migration I spoke about earlier, the migration that makes our young people to go looking for a better life in Europe, with all of the accompanying consequences. Measures have been put in place, but I believe that it is our responsibility. We cannot understand that today in 2016 one cannot move from one country to another without a visa.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I will begin by saying, be it President Nkrumah, Haile Selassie, or Nasser, they all say the same thing. Together we stand, and separated we fall. We cannot stay together if our friends and brothers cannot cross our borders. By the way, these borders, they were fabricated. It is time for Africa to try to come back to the founding fathers' principle of together, standing. We talk a lot about free movement of people. We talk a lot about the young people, but what is the reality? Our young people are still dying, trying to find space and good life in other places. We see that when you want to move from country A to country B in Africa, it's still being very difficult. I appreciate the initiative from the African Union by giving passport to the heads of states and government. With all due respect, I think there is no president that can go to another country and have a problem of visa. It is time that we start giving the passport to the business people, to school children, to all these needed mothers, fathers, brothers. Then we will be complying to what our father Nkrumah said. We must stand together. And we should stop the rhetorics, the talk. It is time for Africa to try to fix this problem. We see that there are groups and important blocs in America, in Asia, everywhere. Africa, we are so small. If we are not together, we will not be able to cope. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Candidate from Kenya, you have 3 minutes.
Free movement is at the core of our union. It binds our oneness, it enhances our integration. It boosts our economies, it helps transfer skills, knowledge, technology, and best practice. I can tell you for sure that from the days of our founding fathers to date, nothing has really changed. Unless we encourage the free movement of people, of goods, of services, of capital across borders, then our dream of getting developed will remain but a dream. And I'll give you evidence. Just look at trade. Inter-Africa trade today stands, and it's at its best, by the way, it stands at 18%, right? In other regions, it's at 40 and 60%. Why? Because they've allowed the free movement of people, of capital, of services, and of goods. I do not think we have an option. We have to open up our borders. The only way that we'll be able to provide those jobs that we need for those children that have become fertile ground for extremists, right, to recruit from. The only way we'll be able to beat that is by opening our borders, by making sure that they have the opportunities that they need to work in any country on the continent, to go to school in any country, to live in any of our countries. Right? By doing that, we'll be stronger. Look at the United States. Why is it so strong? If I'm a tech expert, I can move to Silicon Valley, right? And I will have the infrastructure that I need there to actually develop my skills to the highest level possible. If I'm doing something else, if it's agriculture, I'll go to another part of the United States. That's what we need to do for our continent. China has grown because its people can move around. They can invest in any part. They can transfer skills from one part of the country to the other. What about Europe? I was told by an African businessman that why should he invest in Africa? He needs 20 plus visas to travel across our continent. In Europe, he needs 1 visa to go to 25 countries, right? So if you needed proof that we actually need to open up our borders, we need to talk to each other, we need to trade with each other, we need to move with each other, right? I'll give you the example of Kwame. a Ghanaian student, if we gave him the opportunity, he would actually be able to work in Kenya, to live in Botswana, to get married in Chad, and probably to invest in Senegal, right? He doesn't have that opportunity today. The only opportunity he actually has today is in the confines of that one country called Ghana, right? We actually need to do that for them. That is the debt I was talking about. We owe them that debt. We must do it for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a reminder before I pass to the next question and the last candidate. Please, we kindly ask you not to clap. Thank you very much. Your Excellency, from Senegal, you have 3 minutes.
The issue of the free movement is a very important one for the future of this continent. Not just on the economic level, from a strict meaning of that word, but really from the point of view of the development of knowledge. Today, we have a very important African diaspora all over the world. Teachers, emeritus, professors in all universities, and these same professors, these same researchers do not have the possibilities that they have in America, that they have in Europe. They don't have the same possibilities in Africa. For a professor, of a university professor or a researcher who needs to collaborate with his or her colleague in a laboratory in South Africa, for example, in West Africa, the issue of visa arises, the issue of his stay in that country. It is an ongoing tragedy for Africans from all areas of life, in all kinds of conditions. Today, we are talking about setting up a knowledge society on the African continent. How can we have a community of knowledge without actually involving the African diaspora, the researchers, the emeritus students, the professors who work with the business people who are going to ensure that the conditions for the emergence of the conquering bourgeoisie who are going to set up new economies on the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot talk about the economy without talking about those who bring about the growth of those economies, those who are the agents of social transformation, those who are agents of cultural transformation, of economic transformation. And that is the tragedy that we're living in today. As long as these borders will remain closed to business men and women, as long as these borders will remain closed to academicians, as long as the borders remain closed to citizens who wish to learn, we shall remain where we are. And the most important question that still arises today is that, unfortunately, there is an issue of security as far as the free movement of persons is concerned. We need to bring an end to that. We are not developing in West Africa. When we decided that we would have free movement, people said, watch out, there are 5 million, there are so many Nigerians in Nigeria. If you allow free movement of persons, every village is going to be invaded by Nigerians. So how many years has it been since ECOWAS has actually allowed free movement of people? In my village, in no village whatsoever in Senegal or elsewhere are there Nigerians. So these are fears that we develop.
Candidate from Botswana, same question, you have 3 minutes.
Without a doubt, Mr. Moderator, this is a very critical issue, movement of people. But it's going to require commitment from member states, because free movement of people, as my colleagues have stated, facilitates movement of goods. It will facilitate trade. But what I would do once elected as chairperson of the Union is to encourage member states to adopt policies which would ease regulations that make it impossible to get a visa. Because everything goes back to the visa, as you have said previous speakers say. Because without a visa, then people cannot travel. And therefore, member states would have to try and look at our visa regulations, ease those, harmonize policies, to make it possible for Africans to travel through their continent. I doubt we can do very much about changing borders now. That would be a much taller call to make. But there's also another factor. We should concentrate also, put emphasis on transport to facilitate movement, infrastructure development. It's a bigger issue because when people move, when goods move, transport has to be facilitated. So our mega projects that deal with transport, we may have to put those on the front burner as well. I would make this my priority. And having done that, we would make sure that Africa moves further. I thank you.
We have talked about regional integration. Now we move on to another field that's closely related to the African Union Commission. It is said that the one who pays gives the orders. And when we talk about dependence or independence, it's the other who pays for you. And that would be the case of this African Union Commission. We have listened to the proposals made by President Obasanjo some time back on the financing of the Commission to make it independent, to make it financially independent at least. So what would be your proposal so that we have less shame before the others? Because we can go to them, they tell us, we pay, so you can't crush us. So I'll begin with the candidate of Equatorial Guinea. What solution do you have for financing the African Union Commission? Thank you very much for that question. I'd like to say that we are standing for the chairpersonship of the African Union Commission. So we need commissions, proposals as candidates. We want policies, documents, and decisions that will be taken. This House already has many decisions. Do we have the staff that are willing to implement all these decisions? Earlier on, I talked about the issue of financing, and I talked about a disease. This is a disease. One of the major challenges in this organization is this one, and it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable that an organization be financed or up to over 80% of its budget by sources that are not those of the member states. And if and when I'm elected, that is the first issue I will tackle and address. Otherwise, we are headed nowhere. We'll simply have statements, but the problem won't be resolved. So there are proposals which have been made. We'll look at those proposals. And I think and with a bit of time, I would explain what I would do with some of the proposals we have on the table. But one question we have is, what is the major problem concerning financing? As for me, I think it's a question of will. As a chair of the African Union Commission, we need to encourage discussions with the heads of state, those who are in charge of policies, because it is not acceptable that most African countries pay their contributions to other international institutions like the United Nations, FAO, and so on. Yet, when it comes to the Premier Continent Organization, they say we do not have funds. This means there is a problem, and we need to talk about it. We have proposals today, and those proposals came along with issues. We are talking about taxing importations, but this will lead to inflation in our countries, and then our economies will suffer. What will happen next? There will be no employment. We have about 50% of African educated youth who do not have employment, men and women. We should stop this. We should rather encourage discussion amongst the heads of state and other decision makers. It's a matter of political will. But we do have this issue of political will. It's because this organization is faced with problems of trust. This organization should become useful to heads of state to enable them to make contributions. So it's a matter of dialogue. Let us encourage dialogue. Thank you very much. The candidate from Kenya for the same question, how would you finance the commission?
As you said, the one who pays the piper calls the tune. And so we must take responsibility. We must take responsibility for our growth. We must take responsibility for our development. We must take responsibility for our institutions as well. Just as I said, we must take responsibility for our youth and our women. And so I think that the summit in Kigali was the turning point for us. At that summit, the heads of state made a decision on financing the African Union Commission. Good proposal made by Donald Kaberuka, was agreed to, 0.2 levy on all imports that are coming into our countries. So it's about implementation. We must implement. We came out of Kigali and put ours in an escrow account and informed the African Union Commission that the money was already in an escrow account. I challenge everybody else to do the same. Because if we're really serious about our togetherness, our unity, right, and moving forward together, then we must finance our programs, our initiatives, right? I know for a fact, sitting in one of the Executive Council meetings, that one of the things that we cared very deeply about, right, we were told would never be financed because the finance did not come from us. It came from elsewhere, right? And so what we did was, as Kenya, we again pledged. We said we will meet that gap. We will finance this program because we actually believe in it. We believe that it's going to enhance our capacity to deal with our challenges and provide our own solutions. So listen, it's not just about resources, it's about how effectively we use them, how efficiently we use them, right? And we can all agree that with the limited resources that we have, agree on a limited set of priorities that actually have the capacity, right, to unleash the potential that this continent has, this commission has, to deliver for the people of this continent. And so it's not about lack of proposals. The proposals actually do exist, right? But we need to start being serious about implementing those proposals and making sure that the finances are efficiently used and that they're used on agreed priorities. Thank you.
La même question.
The same question goes to the candidate from Senegal. How can we put an end to the Commission's dependence on the external world?
The African Union is one of the major issues for this organization. It's about sovereignty of the continent. We cannot talk about independence, about our sovereignty all the time. We cannot talk about African solutions to African problems if the other pay for us. This is unacceptable. Therefore, solutions exist. Prior to the Kigali meeting and the proposals by Kaberuka, there has been countless summits I attended where proposals were made. Obasanjo's commission came up with a proposal, and even before that, in 2007, decisions have been made after the audit of the African Union. But the problem is about the implementation, and implementation is about the political will. It is time for us to take our moral responsibility before the African continent, before the African people. This is the matter. Of course, there are issues involved in that. How to manage properly, soundly, the resources at our disposal. And I think there are examples of that. When this question was on the table, when we discussed about it some years back, we said, for instance, ECOWAS is a pioneer. ECOWAS is a pioneer in that. We have what we call the community levy, which has enabled that organization, that regional economic organization, to fund all its institutions and to participate also in the peace fund. So this is crucial. I think it is time to deal with peace and security on our continent, to deal with our programs, to look at this question of funding. This is essential for me, and I have to convince the head of state and government, and I think the civil society organization, the African citizens themselves should come out about this issue and push our continental organization to take its own responsibility. I think this is really the order of the day. And of course, if we think of a commission that work, which is efficient, it speaks about the staff also, the conditions of work, which has to be improved in a more transparent way. So I think the question of financing is an essential dimension of the African Union of the future, but also
La même question.
The same question goes to the candidate from Botswana.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Our commitment to the African Union is demonstrated by our ability to meet our financial commitment to that institution, because that institution survives on our meeting that obligation. I'm aware that some member states have expressed some concerns about perhaps the African Union's commission to manage according to their expectations and their ability to maybe account according to their expectations. So what I think we need to do, perhaps what the incoming chair would have to do, is to demonstrate that ability and maybe to rebuild the trust so that member states can maybe pay with some more confidence, some more trust. I don't even know exactly why member states would feel that they need some coercion to do so. I suppose maybe one of my colleagues said something about political will. When members begin to look for political will from outside when they joined, we need a bit more of drive. And this is why I say we need administrative arrangements that are going to find ways to demonstrate to the members, to say to them, this is what you paid, this is where it went, this is how we're going to spend it. But the second layer, perhaps, is to look out to the private sector to see how we can help find ways of reinvesting our resources in other ranges of investments to grow the little money that we have so that we can spread it a little wider to make the little money go further so that the organization can grow. Because we cannot depend on outside help. Never. The time has come for the organization to grow on its own, and the members have to be convinced to pay on time. And the only way to convince them to pay on time is to convince them that the money they bring in and they invest on the organization is spent as they expect. I thank you.
The candidate from Chad, how could we do away with the financial dependence of the African Union Commission? Well, a wise African said that it's better to give than to receive. I think we need to look at those two angles when it comes to dependence. What do we have and what do we do with it? We need to be realistic and set our priorities. Structures that consume too much money serve no purpose. We need to cut down on the amount of money we spend, and also we need to ensure we refer now to La Fontaine, who said, well, I'm lucky to say that when it comes to resources, I have some experience to fall back to. I discussed with Dr. Kiberuka, who was chosen to think about this matter. And he referred to what took place in ECOWAS, in CEMAC, especially the tax, the community integration tax that is levied at the source, that is at the central bank. So those organizations are working very well. But when you allow member states to contribute, there are delays in making the money available. So the Kigali decision is a good start. 0.2% on eligible imports that was a good decision that was made. And also there's some thinking going on to see other resources, endogenous resources, which can be fallen back to. And the issue of security, I wrote to the chair of the Security Council of the United Nations because we made that decision in Kigali to contribute 25% of the security fund, and the UN committed themselves to pay the gap of about 50%. because security issues should be taken care of by the Security Council. But it doesn't mean that it will turn down assistance that will be given to us. However, with me, I wouldn't base myself on what was going to come from outside. We are faced with if we're faced with a situation, we need to cut down on our expenses, and we should count on our own means. Otherwise, we want to be independent 100 years from now, and yet we have this organization who has been in existence for over 50 years now, and it is a problem really if we cannot ensure a proper running of our own organization. I think this is scandalous. Africa has the means. What we need is the will, and there are mechanisms we could put into place that will help us in resolving this problem. It is our top priority, because without it, there's nothing we can do.
Those were wonderful points that you've been raising. Let me allow excellencies who have joined us in this hall for this important debate to give them one more round of applause. Dear viewers, you are also enjoying, I hope, this first of its kind Mjadala Africa leadership debate from here, the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. We're now going to take another short break, but when we come back, our debate will continue with yet another important issue. Please stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, our break is exactly 2 minutes. Please remain seated because this is a live broadcast. Thank you very much. Dear viewers, excellencies, we're back with our very first Mjadala Africa leadership debate here at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. By the way, for those of you watching us across the continent, once again, we would like to say welcome. This is the very first debate of the African Union Commission chairperson candidates here in Addis Ababa. We've heard there is a channel choice that you can make. For those of you watching us on TV, channel 1, please, this is English. Channel 2 is French. Channel 3 is Portuguese. And channel 4 is Arabic. So you can tune your TV like that for better understanding of our debate here. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, here we're directly passing to our final question of the day. Candidates, as you understand Africa's aspirations, Africa's plans, time and again have been tampered, hindered by our issue with peace and security. It's been claiming lives, stopping us from our important development endeavors, and above all, it's standing between us and our visions. Excellencies, the African Union has pledged, therefore, to silence the guns by 2020. What more can and will be done during your term in office if you are elected as the chairperson of the Commission in quest of resolving, above all, preventing conflicts in Africa? We're going to start from honorable candidate from Kenya. You have 3 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. Actually, you've already said it. Prevention is better than cure. The causes of conflict are well known. We must address the root causes of conflict. And there are few. It's inequality, scarcity, despair, the absence of rule and law, and good governance. And I dare say that here, the African Union Commission actually has a good record. They've put in place an architecture with organs that have been performing relatively well. The Peace and Security Council has been impressive. It's visited conflict countries. It's come up with recommendations on how to actually advance conflict resolution and peace building in those countries. Right? I was aware of their visit to South Sudan, for instance, right in the middle of the conflict, and engaging with the players and advising them and coming back with recommendations. The Office of the Commissioner has also done an incredible job. He's everywhere where there's a conflict. So the African Union actually has a good record. And today we can speak about fewer than 5 countries that are actually engulfed in civil conflict. The others have issues with terrorism, right? And that's a different ballgame, with a different rules of the game and with different solutions. But on peace and security and on conflict, I think they have had a really tremendous success. But what else needs to be done? I think we need to implement what we've done. I think where some of these institutions are slightly weak, we need to take stock and make sure that we review how we can strengthen them. But most importantly, we must finance and resource our institutions. It's already been said here that we agreed that we would actually pay 20% of our peacekeeping bill. We need to get that done. I think it's useless to talk about 2020 if we're not going to walk the talk. And it really is truly about resources, about making sure that we have the resources to build the capacities that we need, to build the institutions that we need, to put mechanisms in place that can deal with our law and order issues, that can deal with our institutional deficiencies. I was part of the team that crafted the constitution for my country, and I can tell you this, that with that framework, it became much easier not only to prevent, right, but also to deal with anything that came up. So it's about institutions, it's about resources, it's about implementing what we have all agreed on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Candidate from Senegal, you have 3 minutes.
The issue of peace and security is a major issue today. So what do we need to do to ensure that guns are silenced in Africa by 2020? This is an ambitious objective, considering what is happening today on the continent. We need to say it. No one can predict what's going to happen. No one knows what's going to happen tomorrow. The causes of conflict are there, and they'll be there as long as our political leaders do not manage diversity within our own countries, religious diversity, political diversity, cultural diversity, regional diversity. And if we take sides with one or the other identities, we shall have conflicts. And the matter of conflicts sends us to the issue of prevention. There are mechanisms. We have the peace and security architecture on the continent, and this is true. But let us see what is happening in reality. The crisis, the post-electoral crisis and others, we need to look at them. We need to promote democracy if we want to ensure the economic and political future of our economies. It is the best way of preventing conflict. The management of diversity, accepting democracy, so that if there are any crises, then we'll find a way of managing them. And we should also be able to send members of the panel of the wise to these situations. But my experience is, since the Liberian crisis, and that in Sierra Leone, and in Liberia, that was a laboratory for the peace and security architecture of the African Union, because it's with ECOWAS that we started that system, because those crises in the 90s led us to where we are today. Therefore, we need to have resources, that is 25%. Let us begin with that is provided for as a levy to address this problem. So 75% by the UN is a good start, but we need to own this process. In my experience, it's up to the Africans themselves who should manage these conflicts from the beginning to the end. Of course, with assistance from the international community. But that assistance is very complicated to put into place. Let us look at the crisis we're faced with today that are shaking the continent and the positions of the various countries at the sub-regional level and at the regional level. We need to play our role. And this is a matter, once again, of political will and moral responsibility of our leaders.
Security, you have 3 minutes.
Conflicts stemming from domestic tensions, terrorism, misuse of natural resources, economic and social problems, violence related to the transition of political power remain a serious concern on our continent. To ensure that there's peaceful election transitions, in my role as chairperson of the Union, I would promote a better understanding of democratic processes, respect for the rule of law, and human rights. I would also make sure that the implementation of the principles as outlined in the African Charter on democracy, elections, and governance are carried through. Much work has already been done, as you've heard my colleagues indicate. The African Peace and Security Architecture, protocol establishing Peace and Security Council, and other relevant conventions are indeed pertinent. Together with the Peace and Security Council, joined as well by the regional economic communities, this should make up for a full regiment to silence the guns on the continent. Under my leadership, when elected chairperson, I will ensure that we further strengthen ongoing post-conflict reconstruction programs, because these are founded to rebuild countries, which will require fostering programs so that we allow nations to heal after a lot of bloodshed, particularly for women and children, who are generally disproportionately affected during violence and during war. We must recognize that also terrorism is a growing cancer impacting a lot of our people on the continent. I think here we must learn from those countries that have found solutions to this scourge. As chairman, we would borrow from what they have achieved, share with them, and arm those nations that may not have had the experience. I think here we would have to implement a tiered support package, because there is nothing like one size fits all when we deal with conflict. Stronger governance and better understanding between our peoples can only be realized through profound dialogue, dialogue which is real. Bold action will have to be taken. Real commitment has to come from our leadership. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Chad, you have 3 minutes.
Peace and security must be the topmost priorities because it determines everything else. It is almost 9 years that I've been appointed Foreign Minister of Republic of Chad, and we have spent long nights in this hall, and even my hair has gone white. The agenda, basically, of Agenda 2063 is on peace and security. We have Mali, DRC, South Sudan, and the list goes on. And I was lucky to follow all these issues for the past 9 years almost. Luckily, there are very few interstate conflicts at the moment. Most of the conflicts we have in Africa today are within countries. But what comes to worsen the situation is terrorism. This is a new phenomenon. There is an international terrorism cancer that is spreading across the world, and Africa happens to suffer from this cancer. And if you look from Mauritania to the Horn of Africa, this is a desert area, very poor, and there we have a problem of insecurity. So issues relating to peace and security must be a topmost priority. The African Union has very important instruments. The African Peace and Security Architecture, for instance. We have the African Standby Force. We have the Nouakchott process, which is already being implemented in some African countries at the moment. You have the ASERT in Algiers. Anyways, we have CARIC as well. You have the early warning system, but despite all these instruments, I think there are root causes related to poor governance, poor political and economic governance, unemployment. Yes, we've been talking about young people. These young people are now falling prey to those who hire them. So I think what we have to do is to ensure prevention. We need to strengthen mechanisms. We need to ensure early warning system. 2 days ago, I came back from Juba as chair of the Council of Ministers, but Chad is also a member of IGAD Plus in this situation. The situation is serious. Serious. We need political will. We need to mobilize resources. That is the 25% that we've committed ourselves to generate. We need to find the 25%. If we need to ensure our own security, we...
Question, a candidate from Equatorial Guinea. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. To say that security issue is one of the most, if not the most fundamental question that we have to face today. Without security, without peace, we will never have development in Africa. That's the problem. While we all agree with this, there seems to be a very serious disconnect between the African Union and the people that decide and the lower population. If we look at all the security problems that we are having today, be it in Darfur, I also come from Central Africa, you see that the question we have in Central Africa, which you all know, is affecting the economy, not only of that country, but all the regional member states. This is why we have to take care of the security issue. I think it is time that we go on concrete proposals and try to bridge the disconnect that exists today. The basis of these security issues, if we look at it carefully, we will find at the bottom the youth unemployment. Most of these people that are being used are youth. And we have to do something to take care of the source of these security issues. I propose 2 things. I think it's not good to try to have a vast program that we cannot implement. The first thing, we have to take care of the young people. We have to find them job. They have to be occupied. And I have a proposal. As a president of the African Union Commission, we must have a higher position for the young people. If it's not at the director level, I will even push at the commissioner level. It is very important because we cannot decide without talking with the youth. We have been saying that for too long. It is time that we materialize. It's a concrete proposal. A second proposal is that we talk a lot about the culture of what I call the culture of war. If you keep talking a lot about war, people will be thinking war. It is time that the Commission also start having programs on the culture of peace. So I will have two concrete proposals. One is to take care of the question of the youth, and the second is to prevent conflicts. With these conflicts, we cannot talk about economic development in Africa. Thank you.
On a fait le tour un peu.
And so we've addressed all the themes that you chose, the major themes. Now we've come to the end of this thematic discussion, but I thought we could go a little further on issues like intra-African trade, which is very important because most of African trade is outside the African continent. We could also talk about terrorism, the African currencies, but also a topic that some of you did not want to raise, that is the International Criminal Court. And I do hope that in another debate, we can discuss all of this because Africans would like to hear you talk about these issues. And we're a bit frustrated not being able to talk about these issues. Now, in the second part of our debate here, we're going to give you time to tell us why you think you're the best candidate for the post of chairperson of the African Union Commission. What makes you that miracle person with a magic wand that is going to drive this continent? We're going to start with Chad. Sorry, with the candidate from Senegal, Mr. Bathily. I'm a bit frustrated because I thought that we could discuss a few more issues, but Mr. Bathily, you can take the floor. Well, I said it before. I am not coming here to serve a particular country or a group of countries. I am a candidate who is coming in to serve the African Union Commission, serve the continent like I've done in the past 10 years in various capacities. And this experience that I have gathered, I would like to use it to serve the African Union Commission so that the younger generation can take advantage of this. It is a duty for me to serve the younger generations. But for many Pan-Africanists who, since independence, have dreamed and really would like to see at last this dream become reality, because I am a Senegalese citizen, but throughout my career, in all what I have done, I am first and foremost an African man who is very passionate about the African continent. I am a citizen of the African continent, and that is why I think I am the best candidate. And if you give me your trust, yes, I would be able to speak on behalf of the Commission under the leadership of heads of state and government, and with the team that would have here in the Commission. Together, we're going to drive the various changes in the areas that we have talked about. Of course, we can't do everything, but there are cross-cutting issues, and some of them have been raised here this evening, which will be at the center of my concerns, of my work. And so I am asking the women, the youth, to hope, to have faith in this African continent. And the hope was born with the OAU, and then with the AU, this hope should not disappear. On the contrary, it's a new dawn, and we need to continue to work. It is going to be a golden opportunity for me to be that person who is going to bring this dream to reality. I thank you.
Honorable candidate from Botswana, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I know that I can do this job, primarily because I have served under 4 presidents in my own country, Botswana. I've also had the honor to serve under 2 presidents in the Republic of South Africa, President Nelson Mandela and President Thabo Mbeki, to set up the new government in that country. I know that I have this capability because I have taken wishes of governments and converted them into actionable programs. I helped the government of the Gambia set up their new local government. I'm sure anybody here from Gambia can testify that. I have helped the governments in the region, in the SADC, set up all their local governments. There is testimony that abounds. The reason I applied for this job is because as an African woman who believes in this Africa, believes that we all have a role to play on our continent, believes that we must serve our continent. I know that the African Union has had all the politicians, the best that the continent can produce. They have put together a dream, and somebody must deliver on that dream. I know I can deliver on that dream. I will take that dream and make it work. I know I can. I have that capability. My work has proved it, and given that chance, I will make it work for you, Africa. I thank you.
La question est la même pour...
Same questions to Chad, Mr. Moussa Faki Mahamat. Why do you think you are that a miracle person to become chairperson of the commission? Well, I've been prime minister in my country. I've been director of the civil cabinet of the president of the republic, president of the Economic and Social Council, and close to 9 years now, I'm the foreign minister of my country. I am a lecturer, and I'm also the son of a teacher. I know what I can do. I know my worth. But I want to be very honest. I want to reconsider everything that it needs to implement all the reforms that has been, the task that has been given to President Kagame, and to initiate others in order to improve the performance of this organization and make it an operational one in resolving crises, conflicts, and to ensure democracy and the respect for human rights, and focus my attention on youth and women, and also to place Africa in a better position in the world arena. My country, Chad, everybody is aware of this, believes in Africa. Over 160 soldiers from Chad have lost their lives, have shed blood for this continent. And I think I'm a soldier as well. And I am ready, with the weapons that you give me, I'm ready to sacrifice my life for this continent. With this kind of vision and with this kind of practical approach that I've developed here during this debate, and as a Pan-Africanist, I think that I can actually meet the expectations of the people of Africa and also to get the vote of the African leaders by end of January 2017. I thank you.
Closing remarks, Equatorial Guinea candidate, you have 3 minutes.
Tenant compte de la situation.
Taking into account the reality of this organization today, I think that I am the man who can hold this office. First, I worked as an international civil servant for 18 years. I was never appointed to a political position. I rather occupied professional positions, and I know these international organizations, like I know this one, which is ours. I'm a young man. Yes, the youngest candidate in the history of this organization. We're talking about the youth. I know the problems of African youth, and that is the reason why the youth are the center, the top priority of my program. And this gives me the characteristic of an active and competent and Pan-Africanist youth. My candidacy is that of hope, and I'm telling the young people who are still dreaming that there is a place for our young people. There is a place for our young people in Africa. They should continue to dream. I'm talking about languages. When I take the 3 characteristics, the young people, we've never seen them in this organization. The first time that we're going to have somebody who knows the ins and outs of this organization, not because he is appointed as a politician, but because he has actually gone through all the professional positions of a complex organization like UNESCO. I'm talking about, I speak several languages, but I'm not Spanish speaking, I'm not French speaking, I'm not English speaking, and I'm not Portuguese speaking. I think I'm just an African. This is very important because within our organization, we also have problems relating to languages. And if I am elected in this organization, I think I'm going to resolve this problem of divisions brought about by languages. I have a lot to bring to this commission. I have the experience. I'm a dynamic person. I've got the will, and I'm coming from a country that has proven its Pan-Africanism. And so I can simply mention the African Nations Cup that we organized in less than 2 months. That has never happened. So there is a lot I can bring to this organization. And that is why I think I know the problems of this organization. And the problem of this organization is that the structure of the organization is not tailored to our problems. Our organization has a serious problem. And I can talk about this because I know it. Thank you. Candidate from Kenya.
I want this job because I think that I bring to it experience from my background in government. I've worked in government and have been able to carry out the reforms that we need to ensure peace and security in our country. I want this job because of the experience that I've had in international organizations, where I've been able to manage huge bureaucracies, manage them well, deliver results that were meaningful to our people. I talked about the TRIPS amendment. It was something that was elusive for a very long time, but not just that. I worked on the cotton package. I worked on LDC's package. I worked on ensuring that export subsidies were completely ruled out. So everything that I have done in the 30 years of my public service has had something to do with ensuring that we made one step further. I believe in our unity. It's something that has bothered me every time that I have left our shores. And I spoke about it yesterday. I said, when we are in Africa, we actually define ourselves by these little small countries that we come from. As soon as we leave the shores, we are all defined by the continent. Our dignity comes from us belonging to this continent. It does not come from us belonging to our countries. And that's how the rest of the world sees us. And so we need to use the opportunity that the African Union Commission will provide for the next chairperson of the African Union to actually give voice, to create our own narrative, to tell our own story. And our story is not a bad one. I will insist on that. It is a story of a population of 1.2 billion people, a huge market. It is the story of a youthful population, right? More educated than any of the previous generations before. It is the story of natural resources that are abundant. It is the story of a continent that actually has the largest parcel of uncultivated land. We should not be facing the challenges that we face. In order to overcome them, we need leadership. We need leadership in our countries, but more importantly, we need leadership here that will be able to bring all of us together on a common agenda to ensure that we define ourselves by our continent, and our continent defines itself by ourselves. That's what will address the issues that have to deal with the youth. That's what will address the issue of migration and of our youth dying in the seas. Coming together, we'll be able to industrialize. We'll be able to do what we said we would do: open up our borders, move trade, move investment, move our young people around. If there's one thing that I'm...
Honorable Amina, thank you very much for your points. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you watching us live here in Addis Ababa for this important debate, the first of its kind, Mjadala Africa Leadership Debate. This has been a wonderful experience for all of you, I believe. Our candidates, for you, we thank you as well. You've talked about youth and women involvement, financing Africa. You talked about the issue of peace and security. Those of you who have joined us here in the hall, if you love what you have seen and heard, please give them one more round of applause. Dear viewers, people of Africa, watching us live here, I hope you too have enjoyed this important endeavor, historic moment in our continent. This brings us to the end of this debate. Me, Groom Jala, and my colleague Alan, we thank you so much for joining us, and good night.
Occasion exceptionnelle.
Exceptional opportunity, a great opportunity, and we do hope that we're going to see this again, that you will have the same liberty to do what you've promised to do for us in Africa. Thank you for taking part in this debate, which has been very rich. See you again.
There is a cocktail organized in the Julius Nyerere building, which is the new Peace and Security building. We kindly request you to avail yourselves there. Let's enjoy the night. Thank you very much.
Brother.